Imagine a world where every action, every thought, and every interaction is rooted in love, kindness, and sacrifice. A world where justice flows not from rules written in law, but from the deep well of a compassionate heart. This is not a utopian dream, but the simple yet profound reality offered by the example of Jesus Christ, who stands not only as a figure of divine authority, but as the ultimate moral teacher. Jesus stands as the embodiment of true moral excellence. At the core of Jesus' moral excellence is his unparalleled ability to embody. His love transcended human limitations, reaching out to the marginalized, the oppressed, and the broken-hearted. Jesus understood that true love, the love that reflects the highest moral excellence, goes beyond what is easy and convenient. It is easy to love those who love us. It is easy to act kindly toward those who show kindness in return. But Jesus calls us to love our enemies, to pray for those who persecute us, and to extend grace to those who may never reciprocate. This radical love challenges the very notion of moral excellence in the world. In many ways, the world defines excellence based on strength, achievement, and status. But Jesus redefines greatness by demonstrating how love, sacrificial love, is the ultimate measure of true greatness. In addition to his love, Jesus demonstrated moral excellence through his unwavering commitment to justice. He had a deep compassion for those who suffered under injustice, and he boldly spoke against the oppression of the weak by the strong. He confronted religious hypocrisy, the exploitation of the poor, and the disregard for human dignity. His compassion for the downtrodden was evident in his ministry to the sick, the outcast, the poor, and the sinful. He did not shy away from challenging the systems of power that perpetuated suffering. He refused to stand by in silence when he saw the vulnerable being mistreated. The Sermon on the Mount provides a powerful illustration of his moral vision. Jesus' teachings in this famous sermon flip the conventional understanding of righteousness on its head. Instead of glorifying power, wealth, and prestige, he blesses the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, and those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. His moral excellence isn't just about avoiding evil, it is about a deep commitment to justice, a desire to make things right in the world. And the means by which Jesus brings justice is through mercy, forgiveness, and grace. His approach to justice is rooted in a deep understanding of human fallibility and the need for redemption. What makes Jesus' moral example so remarkable is that he was not detached from the human experience. His life was marked by struggle. Instead, he chose to bear the suffering for a greater purpose, the salvation of humanity. In this way, his moral excellence was not theoretical or abstract, but practical and tangible. It was expressed in the choices he made in his daily life, even when it seemed to cost him everything. His moral teachings also reveal an extraordinary humility, an aspect of his character that stands in stark contrast to the pride and arrogance often seen in those who hold power. Despite his divine nature, he lived a life of humility, never demanding honor or recognition. He did not seek to elevate himself, but to bring glory to God and to serve others. His humility was exemplified most dramatically in his willingness to lay down his life. Another crucial aspect of Jesus' moral excellence is his commitment to truth. In a world filled with deceit, manipulation, and half-truths, Jesus' words were always aligned with the ultimate truth, the truth of who God is, the truth of who we are, and the truth of the world's need for redemption. His truth was not a rigid set of rules, but a living reality that pointed to something greater, the kingdom of God. Jesus' moral excellence is grounded in this truth, and his life became a demonstration of what it looks like to live fully in accordance with that truth. In him, we see what a life fully aligned with God's purposes looks like. This concept of truth is intertwined with the way Jesus interacted with people. He did not simply tell others the truth from a distance. He lived it with them. When he encountered sinners, he didn't avoid them or cast judgment upon them. Instead, he spoke truth into their lives with grace, offering them the opportunity to change and to experience forgiveness. His moral excellence was not about pointing out the flaws of others, but about inviting them to a higher way of living, a way rooted in love, humility, and truth. Jesus' moral excellence challenges us to reevaluate our own lives. In a world that often glorifies individualism, self-promotion, and the pursuit of personal gain, Jesus invites us into a different way of living. His example calls us to strive for something greater, a life that reflects the highest moral virtues, a life where love, compassion, and humility guide our every decision, a life where our commitment to justice and truth shapes the way we engage with the world. To follow Jesus' example is not merely to adhere to a set of rules, it is to allow his character to shape ours, to reflect his light in a world that desperately needs it. Ultimately, the concept of Jesus as the embodiment of true moral excellence is not simply an ideal to admire from afar. It is a challenge to live out his example in our own lives. The moral excellence he displayed is not beyond our reach, but is available to us as we seek to follow him. His life shows us that true moral greatness is not about power, prestige, or perfection. It is about love, humility, service, and sacrifice. And when we seek to live according to this example, we participate in the transformation of our own hearts and in the renewal of the world around us. Jesus' teachings about love and forgiveness stand as the foundation of his moral vision for humanity. In a world often driven by division, rivalry, and retribution, Jesus offers a radically different approach. His call to love and forgive is not merely a suggestion, but a command that reshapes the way we understand relationships, power, and our place in the world. Jesus didn't just talk about love and forgiveness, he lived them out in the most challenging of circumstances, demonstrating what it truly means to love unconditionally and forgive without limit. When Jesus calls us to love our neighbors, he doesn't set boundaries on that love. The command is not limited by race, social status, or past wrongs. His love stretches far beyond the natural inclinations of human beings. Love, as Jesus teaches, is not just about affection or sentimentality. It is an active choice to will the good of others, even when it is inconvenient or difficult. He invites us to see others not as obstacles to our own happiness or as those who owe us something, but as individuals deserving of our love, regardless of who they are or what they have done. His love is inclusive, extending to all people, no matter how flawed or unworthy they may seem in the eyes of the world. Jesus' radical love is most clearly demonstrated in his treatment of those who were considered outsiders or sinners by the standards of his time. He reached out to the marginalized, the poor, the sick, and those who were despised by society. The tax collectors, the prostitutes, the lepers, and the Samaritans. Individuals whom he did not look at their past mistakes or their social status. He saw them as individuals in need of healing and redemption. His love was a call to transformation, inviting each person into a new life of grace and renewal. But it's not only the love of others that Jesus challenges us to embrace. It's also the love of our enemies. This is a love that does not seek vengeance or hold grudges. It is a love that chooses forgiveness over anger and reconciliation over division. Jesus' call to love our enemies flips the conventional wisdom of the world on its head, challenging us to break free from cycles of hatred and violence. Forgiveness, too, is a cornerstone of Jesus' moral vision. Jesus speaks repeatedly about the importance of forgiving others, even when forgiveness is the hardest thing to offer. In his famous teaching on forgiveness, he tells his followers to forgive not just 7 times, but 77 times, illustrating that there is no limit to the grace we should extend to those who wrong us. This teaching is not just theoretical, but is put into practice in his own life. Even as he hung on the cross, being crucified by those who had rejected him, he uttered the words, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Jesus' ability to forgive in the face of unimaginable suffering is a powerful demonstration of his moral excellence and the depth of his love. Forgiveness, as Jesus teaches, is not about excusing wrongdoing or ignoring the pain caused by others. It is about releasing the grip of bitterness and resentment that can hold us captive, allowing healing and reconciliation to take place. Forgiveness frees us from the cycle of revenge and anger, and it allows us to move forward in peace. It is not a sign of weakness, but a testament to the strength of character required to forgive. Jesus shows us that forgiveness is not just for the sake of the one forgiven, but for our own spiritual well-being. It is an act of grace that mirrors the forgiveness we have received from God, who forgives us freely and unconditionally. In a world where grudges are held and conflict often remains unresolved, if we truly embrace Jesus' teachings on love and forgiveness, we would see a world transformed by kindness, understanding, and the willingness to seek peace rather than perpetuate conflict. Jesus' call to love and forgive is not just an idealistic dream. It is a moral imperative that, when lived out, has the power to heal hearts and change lives. His example invites us to move beyond our own pride, hurt, and desires for revenge. It challenges us to see the world through his eyes, to love not just those who are easy to love, but everyone, especially those who hurt us. And in doing so, we reflect the very nature of the God who loved the world so much that he sent his Son to offer forgiveness, love, and grace to all. Following the example of Jesus in our daily lives is an aspiration that challenges every part of our being. It requires a shift in mindset, a transformation of character, and a deep commitment to living according to his teachings. Jesus' life was a model of perfect morality, but it was not just a life to admire from afar. It is one to emulate, to make our own, and to live out in a world that so desperately needs the values he embodied. The call to follow Jesus is not a call to perfection, but it is a call to growth. It is not about achieving moral excellence by our own efforts, but about constantly aligning ourselves with his example, allowing his character to shape our lives. In following him, we are invited into a journey of transformation, a path that requires us to challenge our own selfish inclinations and desires, to set aside our egos, and to put the well-being of others first. Jesus does not ask us to follow him in a passive sense. He calls us to actively engage in the process of becoming more like him. One of the most significant aspects of following Jesus is the call to love others as he loved us. In his life, he showed us what love truly looks like, not just the sentimental affection that can sometimes be easily given, but the sacrificial love that costs something, the kind of love that requires putting others before ourselves. Jesus' love was not dependent on whether others loved him in return. He loved even when it was inconvenient, when it was difficult, and when it seemed impossible. His love reached. But following Jesus also means choosing forgiveness. Jesus did not merely preach about forgiveness, he lived it. The most powerful demonstration of this was in his final moments on the cross, when he cried out, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Even in the face of betrayal, rejection, and suffering, Jesus forgave. His forgiveness was not a denial of the pain or the injustice done to him. It was a choice to release others from the debt they owed him, to break the cycle of bitterness, and to offer grace instead. To follow Jesus is to learn the practice of forgiveness, even when it feels like the hardest thing to do. It means choosing to let go of grudges, not because the wrong was right, but because we recognize the freedom that comes from releasing others and ourselves from the chains of unforgiveness. Another critical aspect of following Jesus is the call to humility. Humility, in the way Jesus lived it, is not about diminishing oneself or denying our value. It is about seeing ourselves in proper relation to God and others. It is about recognizing that true greatness is not found in power or dominance, but in serving others, especially those who cannot repay us. To follow Jesus is to reject pride and self-promotion, to humble ourselves and seek to serve others rather than demanding to be served. The example of Jesus also challenges us to live with integrity and consistency. His life was marked by a singular devotion to God and to his purpose. Every action, every word, every decision he made flowed from his deep commitment to his mission of bringing the kingdom of God to earth. There was no separation between what Jesus preached and how he lived. His actions and words aligned perfectly. In our own lives, we are often faced with temptations to live inconsistently. Moreover, to follow Jesus is to live with a deep sense of purpose and mission. Jesus' life was not lived aimlessly. Every moment was filled with intention. He knew his purpose was to bring salvation to humanity, to reveal the love of God to the world, and to call people to a new way of living. His life was one of focus, of clarity, and of unwavering commitment to his mission, even when it led to suffering and sacrifice. To follow Jesus is to live with purpose as well, to recognize that our lives are not about our personal success, comfort, or status, but about fulfilling the unique mission that God has given us. It means living each day with the awareness that our actions can impact others, that our words can either build up or tear down, and that we have a role in furthering God's kingdom on earth. Following Jesus also requires courage. Jesus was not afraid to challenge the status quo, to speak truth to power, or to stand up for justice, even when it made him unpopular or endangered his life. He was not swayed by the opinions of others or by the pressures of the world. He remained steadfast in his commitment to truth and righteousness. To follow Jesus is to be willing to stand firm in our faith, even when it is difficult, when it costs us something, or when we face opposition. It means being willing to speak truth in love, to stand up for what is right, and to be the voice of justice in a world that often turns a blind eye to it. It means having the courage to be different, to live according to values that may not be popular or comfortable, but that reflect the heart of God. Following Jesus is not a passive endeavor. It is an active daily choice to align ourselves with his life, to be shaped by his character, and to live in a way that reflects his love, his forgiveness, his humility, his integrity, and his mission. It is a call to live intentionally, with purpose and courage, choosing every day to reflect the example he set. This path is not always easy, but it is the one that leads to true fulfillment, to the life of peace, joy, and purpose that we were created for. To follow Jesus is to embark on a journey that will transform us, not into perfect people, but into people who reflect the love and grace of God to a world that needs it more than ever. The idea that morality is not simply about following rules, but about shaping character, is one of the most profound aspects of Jesus' teachings. His vision of morality transcends the limitations of legalism and encourages a deeper transformation within the human heart. In a world where laws are often seen as the ultimate measure of right and wrong, Jesus introduces the idea that true morality is found in the condition of a person's heart and in the intentions behind their actions. This shift from external behavior to internal transformation is a central theme in his moral teachings. Jesus consistently emphasized that the law is not enough to guide human behavior. It must be understood in its deeper spiritual context. He spoke of the law not as something to be obeyed merely for the sake of compliance, but as a reflection of God's heart for humanity. However, Jesus went further than simply teaching adherence to the law. He invited his followers to move beyond mere obedience, to a place where their hearts were aligned with the true spirit of the law. In his famous Sermon on the Mount, for example, he challenges the traditional understanding of commandments, revealing that morality isn't just about outward actions, but about inner thoughts and desires. Jesus' teaching on anger is a perfect illustration of this shift in moral understanding. The law might say, do not murder, but Jesus teaches that even harboring anger in one's heart is a form of breaking that law. He brings attention to the fact that sin begins in the heart, not just in outward actions. The same principle applies to lust, greed, and even to the way we speak about others. It is not enough to simply avoid actions that break the law. The deeper issue is the transformation of the heart and mind. Jesus calls us to purify our intentions, to look inward, and to strive for a righteousness that is not just external, but deeply rooted in our character. The emphasis on internal transformation over external rule-following also shapes Jesus' teachings on forgiveness. It is not simply enough to forgive outwardly. True forgiveness comes from a transformed heart. Jesus invites his followers to forgive not just once, but continually and with a heart of mercy. This teaching challenges us to examine our attitudes toward others, especially those who have wronged us, and to move beyond resentment or bitterness. Forgiveness, in Jesus' view, is not a mechanical act, but a demonstration of a heart that has been shaped by grace. It's about becoming the kind of person who can extend mercy, even in the face of hurt, because that is how God has shown mercy to us. Another key example of Jesus' understanding of morality as a matter of character rather than rule-following can be seen in his interactions with the Pharisees, who were the religious leaders of his time. The Pharisees were meticulous in following the rules of the law, but Jesus frequently criticized them for focusing on outward appearances while neglecting the more important matters of justice, mercy, and faithfulness. He accused them of being like whitewashed tombs. The transformation of character, according to Jesus, is not something that can be achieved through human effort alone. It is a work that God does in the hearts of those who are willing to submit to his will and to be shaped by his love. This moral transformation is what Jesus refers to when he speaks of being born again. It is a renewal of the inner person that enables one to live in accordance with God's will, not out of obligation, but out of a deep desire to reflect his love and goodness. As this inner transformation takes place, the actions of a person will naturally align with the moral teachings of Jesus. Instead of adhering to rules simply because they are rules, a person who has been transformed by God's love and grace will live according to the moral principles that Jesus taught, because those principles have become part of their very character. Ultimately, Jesus' moral teachings invite us to look beyond the external and focus on the internal. They challenge us to pursue not just outward compliance with moral laws, but a heart that is aligned with the goodness, justice, and mercy of God. The pursuit of righteousness in Jesus' eyes is not about checking off a list of do's and don'ts, but about allowing the love of God to transform us from the inside out. True morality, according to Jesus, is about becoming the kind of people who reflect the character of God in every thought, word, and deed. This kind of moral transformation is what leads to true freedom and fulfillment, as we live not by the letter of the law, but by the Spirit of God's love and grace.